Thank you everyone for joining us. This is the Kingston Forward meeting for Albany and Hurley Avenues. We're going to be getting started in just a few minutes. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to give just a minute or two for folks to get logged in and then we'll be getting started. But thank you for joining us. This is the Kingston Forward meeting for Albany and Hurley Avenues. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is the Kingston Forward meeting for Albany and Hurley Avenues. It's great to be with you all tonight. Just a few reminders before we get started. This meeting is being recorded, you will be able to find it tomorrow on the engagekingston.com website. So if you have to miss any part of it, or if you want to tell any of your neighbors that should be posted after tonight, the video on the engagekingston.com. Also tonight, if you have any questions for us, please type them into the Q&A button and we'll be answering as many as we can during the meeting, and we'll be can answer additional questions following up. So please, anything that comes to mind, type it into the Q&A button as we go along tonight. And as we get started here, I'm going to turn it over to Bartek.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Bartek Stardai. I'm the Director of Housing Initiatives for the City of Kingston and leading the rezoning process on the city side in collaboration with Dover Cole. Tonight's meeting is a continuation of public input that began last November and that will continue through the spring as the draft code is released to the public. We'll start with recapping some of the community input that was provided to the city and to Dover Cole back in November. We'll provide a little bit of a background on form-based codes, and then we will go into Albany Avenue and Hurley Avenue regarding potential zoning scenarios for each one. And then we'll follow up, we'll end with next steps and the survey. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks. And I am here representing a much larger team, and you can see the photos here across the bottom of the screen. I'm Amy Gross with Dover Cole Partners, and I'm here with a few other members of our team you'll hear from tonight. And also on our team, many of you met back in November, the LaBerge group, who is leading up the environmental impact work. And so we'll hear a little bit more about that tonight as well. We also have the Land Use Law Center, who is helping us with the code integration and any legal questions. We also have Hall Planning and Engineering, who's helping with street design, and Gridix, who is going to be putting together an online platform. So when we have a draft code, you'll be able to review it all online. And I'm going to turn it over now to Victor Dover, who's going to take us through our first few slides.
Thanks, Amy. Good evening, everybody. We're going to start with a quick poll question. We have a setup here where you can send a text message and we can ask you a question, and then you can give us an answer. So we'll do a first one here just to see who's with us tonight. And assuming that all is working like it should, we'll then ask some additional questions as we go along through the evening. So the way this works is, first you send a text message to a very specific address using your cell phone. That address is Dover Cole 516. So look in the lower right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, you'll see it. DOVERKOHL 516. That's the person, that's the message that you're sending. You're sending that message to the number 22333. So at the top of your screen in the middle, you see in yellow 22333. That's who you send it to. And then the message that you send is Dover Cole 516. I know it's a funny code, but what that does is it lets your subsequent messages fall into the answer basket for a quick polling question. So after you have sent that message, once you'll get a response. It says you've joined Dover Cole's session. And then when you want to leave, you can reply with leave. So give everybody a chance to do that just for a second. DOVERKOHL 516. You send that to 22333. We need some music or something in the background, Amy, while we're waiting for everybody to have a chance to send their text message. All right, if there are questions about that, you can always type them in using the buttons at the bottom of your screen, and one of us will help you sort that out. So now if you want to share your screen and go back to the questions, Amy? Well, thank you, Elise. So this first question is, what best describes you? You can pick one from this list, A through F. So if your answer is A, you just, again, send a cell phone message to the exact same place, 22333. If your answer is A, you put A, send, and your result will come up. We have some E's. Okay, the E's win. The A is for if you live on or within a couple of blocks of Hurley Avenue. B is if you live on or within a couple of blocks of Albany Avenue. If you work there on either one, you can use C. Obviously, some of you will have overlaps here. Just pick the one that best describes you. Your answer would be D if you own property there on or near Albany or Hurley Avenues. If you live, work, or own property elsewhere in Kingston, but not on Albany or Hurley Avenue, that would be E. And then the last one is you don't live, work, or own property in the city of Kingston, but you frequently travel Albany or Hurley Avenues. So as your answers come in, you see the bars moving across your screen. That's telling us who's in the room with us tonight. And Amy, when you think you've had enough time on the question and we've got a good sense of it, just say go and we'll move on to the next part.
Okay, it looks like it's slowing down. And so Elise, if you want to stop your screen share and I'll start mine up again. So that was a good practice run, and we'll do more of those questions as the night goes on.
And as we are joined by more participants, we'll repeat the instructions. So if you're with someone or talking to someone who has not heard what we just described, don't worry, we'll explain it again and they'll get another chance. Now, if you're already logged in, it's done. You can just stay there, and when we put up a new question, just send your answer and to the same place, and it'll go right along. I will say this project of working for Kingston on the code project has just reminded us that your town has a long and amazing history with the town building culture. It's the kind of fine-grained, walkable urbanism and human scale architecture, the great building to street relationships that many other towns would envy. But these things are also dependent on having the right rules. And so that means this chance to reform the zoning is really a chance to reset the great town building culture of Kingston, to help you get the town that you want. And Amy, I'll just say next and let you advance as you're ready. I want to talk a little bit about where we are in the process so far. We've been working on this now for quite a while. This is the latest updated timeline for the project. And you can see that we've been at it since the end of summer and the beginning of the fall last year. This process we're underway with is about halfway through. So this is a really exciting time. There's still time to iron out rough spots and get more feedback. But it's also a chance for us to get a lot more specific, like tonight. So after we have tonight's meeting and tomorrow night's, we'll have a first draft sometime in April. Then there will be a series of revisions and processes to get us into the approvals step of things. So there's a great chance here to check in with all of you, see where we are, show you what we have so far, and get more feedback. Next. Now, some of you probably remember in November, we had a remarkable series of events in a hybrid format, both online and in person, to learn about the citizen stakeholders and, that are affected by the Kingston zoning, about your goals for the town, and how we can best reform the rules so that you get the town that you want. We had opportunities for people to meet in small groups around special topic areas, in large groups to look at the big screen and think about things together, as well as online. So nearly 400 people came and touched the plan or the code in process at that time. We had 5 spirited walking tours guided by your citizens to show us and get us looking at in detail at places like Midtown, Uptown, Wilbur, Ponkaki, and Rondout. And we learned a lot by being on the ground in the town, walking up and down the streets and asking questions, measuring things. How far is it from building to building? How far is it from the back of the sidewalk to the front of the porch? The kinds of things that end up being baked into the rule book that is the genetic code for growing your town. Next. Now, one quick announcement. We had planned originally to do some additional walking tours coming up this weekend for Albany Avenue and the waterfront. Those are going to need to be rescheduled. If you haven't seen the weather report, there's a big snow event coming your way. And so just in anticipation of how cold and wintry it's going to be this weekend, we've postponed that. So we're stay tuned. If we have the opportunity to do these again on another day, we will, or replace them with a different kind of activity. So stand by. And Amy, toward the end of tonight's meeting, be sure to repeat that for the people who might have joined in late, because as we get a few new arrivals, I may not have that announcement. The meetings that we held during the Charrette Week in November covered a wide array of topics. You can see some of them listed here on the right. I think the lesson for us as planners is really to remember that everything is connected to everything else. There's a tremendous amount of overlap, for example, between historic preservation and transportation and economic development. So all of these subjects were addressed at once. You notice at the top of the list is housing, because we've heard really clearly that folks in Kingston are concerned about the housing attainability crisis. And so I want to make sure, we heard you loud and clear about that. And it belongs at the top of the list because actually all the other features are connected so deeply with success and progress on the housing front. We set up a temporary on-location design studio in the council chambers. That just gave us a chance to test ideas on real life sites and in real life situations. You can see members of our team like Eric Pate there working on the computer, working on drawings, putting things up where people could see them. And asking questions. What if? How about if we change this rule? What would happen? What if we thought through the plan for this area? What would happen? And that let us begin the process of synthesizing your many visions into one. Some of you have seen this map that we call it the synthesis map, where we attempt to summarize in the simplest possible way what we were hearing as recurrent themes. we ask people for frank feedback on their likes and dislikes. What parts of town, what buildings in town, either in their way that they're planned on their sites and positioned on the street, or the way that the architecture greets the street, why they felt good or bad about those things. And so the charrette participants were asked to identify the ones they wish there were more of. And the ones you see here on the screen received the most yes votes in that system. We had people put green sticker dots by their favorites, and these were some of the favorites. So we went back and we measured those and looked at them in detail, and our draft work on the code will reflect those findings. You can read our summary of the event I've been describing at engagekingston.com. Here's a sample page from it. So they're big visuals and simple. It's a quick read. It's a great chance for you to get caught up if you're just joining in on this process. It's also a chance for you to remind us about something we might have missed so far. There emerged from all this a list of big ideas about things you could do in the code that would make life better in Kingston and help you build your way out of your problems and into your vision. And so I'll leave these on the screen here for a second so that you can read them, but they are all in some way or another related to design. The key is to help people have more opportunities and flexibility to do great things, and make it easier for people to do what the community has identified as the right thing by simplifying the code and the process of getting permission for those things. We heard where you are in the city matters a lot. We heard a lot of interest in ensuring a resilient, green-minded future. There was a lot of discussion about walkability, about getting the parking rules right that might have inadvertently over the years worked in opposition to your other goals. And then there were identified trouble spots throughout the code, like things that consistently bring up problems or require extra red tape, bureaucratic processes, or expense, or just simply thwart development and revitalization that you want. So as we began to find out what those were, we went to work on them. Let's talk about what a form-based code is. You've probably heard this. The goal here is to replace the old zoning from the 1960s with a new regulation called a form-based code. The form-based code just simply is another way of doing the land development regulations. It has a lot in common with the zoning. There are rules in there, and in the form-based code, where you are, it tells you what rules apply to your site or the one you're concerned with. But the big fundamental difference is the way that the rules are organized. Form-based codes take into account the real world fact that buildings change their uses over time, and that just organizing the code or its table of contents by land uses like residential or commercial or industrial, it results in very crude results. But if we organize instead by physical form, like the Main Street idea or the Elm Street idea, we can get a much better result. And so the form-based code gets adopted by the Common Council and becomes the law of the land. And you can read more about how form-based codes work at the website from the Form-Based Codes Institute, which is formbasedcodes.org. I encourage everybody to take a look at that. That was the mission, bring Kingston into the 21st century with a modernized 21st century code called a form-based code. To make a long story short, there are rules in a form-based code that make the results more predictable. You can emulate the places that you admire, get less of what you don't, because it becomes pretty clear how you get a few things right in building design or placement. And then in exchange, lots of flexibility on the things that don't need to be regulated nearly as strictly. Next. So that, for example, includes where on the lot you can build, but it goes farther than that. It says, well, the building to street relationship and getting your building and the next building to have a meaningful, beneficial similarity without over controlling things is done through changes in the code. So be more specific. And then where parking goes. On some streets, it's not appropriate to have the parking lot in the front and the building in the back. It needs to be the other way around. So those are the examples of the kinds of things that make built results under form-based codes more predictable. Next. A visualization done by from Cleveland for our great friend Steve Price illustrates what this is about. If you take a look at this existing street, and then you can see in the distance some historic buildings that had the original DNA of the town there. And then I go on to the next one, Amy. Before and after, you can see here now infill development, filling in the lost space, starting to add more of the kinds of buildings that fit that rule book. And then that will inspire investment and reinvestment and make for better street scene. So in a way, this picture illustrates what happens when you get the public parts of the built environment, like streets and public parks and plazas, synced up with and right. And then you also get the private parts, like the private buildings that give shape to that public room. You get them matched up. That's the point of showing you this illustration. So in order to do that, we control a few things in form-based codes. Here's a typical list. How is the building positioned along its street, and what meets the front? Is it a stoop, a porch, a storefront, a balcony? What are those kinds of elements? Then what kind of building is it? Is it a Main Street building, or a house or a cottage, or many other variations? And then what are the elements in the architecture that we can see, even very different buildings, one style to another or one era to another on the same street, have tended to have that still make them go together well in a set, as illustrated so well from the uptown picture on the upper right. The form-based codes also get into the subject of how the streets should work and where parking goes. And yes, land uses. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in a form-based code. We still regulate land uses, but land uses are just simply not the organizing principle. And there should be, in a form-based code scenario, more flexibility in many other parts of town. Oh, just vocabulary word for the night, the transect. What is this? It's a range from urban to rural in our case. It's a tool we borrowed from the study of the natural world. But the idea is that each of the different context zones or habitats, as you move from urban to rural, have their own grammar, their own vocabulary, and things tend to be designed differently depending on where you are. That's kind of like the karmic idea of know who you are and be that, except here it's know where you are and build the way that matches. That way you don't get a suburban, say, Pizza Hut on Main Street when you really wanted an urban one that had a storefront that matched up with the storefronts to its left and right. So if you know you're on the Main Street, then you can follow the Main Street rules. And so that's the simplest way to describe what the transect is for. It divides the world of the coded land up into a range of different zones, T zones, and then they have their own conventions. So you know where you are, that's the part of the code that you go to. Go to the next one, Amy. To make that more vivid for you, this slide illustrates how, as we move from the natural edge environment to the area where there are primarily single-family detached houses on larger lots, to the edge of the neighborhood, to the center of the neighborhood, things start to get closer together. They become more likely to be attached. There's a greater range in that mix of uses. And then off to the far right here, special districts that cover situations not easily regulated by the other T zones, which could be a special district for large footprint retailers, or a special district for the university campus, or specialized uses like that are not as simple as the traditional building types of Main Street or house streets. So that's all about the transect. Now let's make that vivid for you on Albany and Hurley Avenues. Amy?
Great, thank you. So as we were reviewing all of the input that we had gotten in November, we started to look in detail at all of the neighborhoods and streets, and realized that there were a few areas that we could really use some additional feedback and input on. And so particularly the Albany and Hurley Avenue corridors, we didn't have as much conversation about these during the charrette week. So thought it'd be useful to organize these meetings for this purpose. And so I'm going to be going through a few slides of things we've been thinking about, and then we'll open up for additional keypad or additional phone questions. So have your phone ready, and we'll get to those questions in just a minute. So we're going to start with Albany Avenue. And as we look at Albany Avenue, there's really two kind of distinctive areas. The area you can see where my cursor is, Flatbush Avenue kind of divides, where the area to the south is, you can see more residential form homes set back from the street. And as you get to the area north, it becomes more commercial in use. And so we'll be looking at each of those areas separately. So we're going to start with the area south of Flatbush. So zooming in here, you can see in the aerial photograph, looking at those, the long lots and the larger houses, set back from the street. We noticed that on the west side, the lots are really deep, and also, just looking through our analysis maps, seeing that there is the area leading back to the Esopus Creek and the 100-year and 500-year floodplain layers that you see here, FEMA designations. So that somewhat limits the area as you get deep into these lots. But again, it's a really distinctive form, and we started looking at the history of how that came to be. Here is some images of the Sanborn map from 1899, so a little over 100 years ago. And so the Sanborn maps documented the built environment and the buildings. It basically documented each building for purposes of fire insurance. And so we can see, kind of zoomed in here, Albany Avenue, right here where my cursor is. And what we've done here on the next slide is superimpose some pieces. They're each in individual squares, but we pieced them together along Albany Avenue here. And you can see, that obviously towards Broadway and towards Uptown, the buildings are, very close together, but that really distinctive form along Albany Avenue of homes set back from the street, leading out away from Uptown. And I'm going to make that a little bit transparent here, and you can see how those line up with the existing buildings today. So that pattern that we see along the street really has been in place over 100 years. It's very interesting to us as urban planners to see this history and see how the place came to be. So viewing along the street here, this is what that looks like. Sure, many of you familiar with this setting, and we as planners start to think about the setbacks, and so measuring them 50, 60, 70 feet setback from the sidewalk. So pretty deep front setbacks, large homes lining the street, these great historic structures. And we can see over time that the avenue has evolved, and so you see side by side different architectural eras, different architectural styles, but they all follow a kind of similar grammar with these deep setbacks, similar heights. So the form of the buildings has some consistent things about it. Also, as you start to move along the corridor, we do find some examples of different uses. So for example, here's on the right side of this picture, a small office building that comes up a little closer to the street. On the left side here, we see a sign on the front. I believe this is a funeral home. So there's some other businesses beyond residential happening along the corridor. Looking at the existing zoning rules, here is on my cursor, you can see Albany Avenue. So the existing zoning today has basically one family residential, this blue color on the west side, two family residential, this yellow color on the south, or I'm sorry, the southeast. And then again, we'll be looking at the area of Flatbush in a bit, and that is this area here in red, is general commercial. So back in November, we had an initial survey that was on the website, and we asked people about housing types and what types of housing you would like to see in the city, and where duplexes, triplexes, or fourplexes were desired. So here's the answers that we got citywide asking that question. And we thought it was interesting, that the folks who responded to that survey, there was a lot of interest in allowing, variety being allowed in the residential variety and so variety in the residential neighborhoods, and also allowing them to happen in near commercial areas. So we were curious tonight, we're going to ask you, is this corridor one of those corridors where we would like to see some variety? And you're going to hear a term called missing middle housing, and that's a planner term, and some of you might be familiar with it. And basically, when we travel around the country, we see a lot of examples of single family homes. We also see examples of mid-rise, but we don't see a lot of the kind of the middle range, the duplex, the triplex, the townhouse, live works. And this is something that we see historically in Kingston, great examples of, but not as many modern or current developers are build them. So it's something that form-based code writers, by writing standards specific to these types of forms, can encourage, and more of these types. And so and they provide great variety, walkability, and affordability. And so there's a lot of good reasons to see affordable or missing middle housing. And so I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts about that tonight. Also thinking about mix of uses. And so, we asked about if there should be corner stores or small offices within walking distance. And so got a big variety of people saying yes to that answer. And then we've been, looking at the history in Kingston. This retrospective put together by the Friends of Historic Kingston looked at the mom and pop stores, the corner stores, great tradition throughout the city historically, having this mix of uses. Also, we've been looking at precedents in other places, and looking at how in some residential neighborhoods you could build additions, near corners, and so thinking about in the future, should additions be allowed in this area, potentially to the front or the side, or should additions be more to the rear? So thinking about how the neighborhood could grow and evolve in the future. Finally, looking at the existing mix of uses, I mentioned that office building. There's a number of examples of homes that have been inhabited by offices, bed and breakfasts, just a number of commercial uses that exist along the corridor. So thinking about setting the rules for the future, wondering about what should those rules allow. So there is a new survey that's on the Engage Kingston site right now. We pulled the results through, this is a preliminary results through the beginning of this week. It is still online, so you can still go and answer and tell us your thoughts, but thought you might be interested in just a preview of what we've been hearing so far. And asking about the characteristics of future development along the corridor and what you'd like to see. So you can see some of the top results here about historic preservation, but reusing buildings and having interest in with residential or commercial uses allowed. Wanting to see more public spaces, plazas, community gardens, and then a variety of different answers about maintaining the existing buildings and where additions can happen. So again, I'm curious to hear your feedback on this. And so with that, we're going to do some live polling to see the people who are here tonight, what they think. So once again, if you already logged in, you don't need to do this again, but anyone who did not answer the first question, the way this works, you can send a text to 22333, and you send the text Dover-Cole 516. And when you do that, you'll get this confirmation that you are in. You only need to do that one time. So we're going to ask a few questions in a row this time. And so you don't have to keep doing it. Just do it once and we'll be able to get your answers. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and Elise is going to bring up our set of questions.
Okay, so Awesome. So like Amy said, we're going to ask some questions about Albany Ave, specifically south of Flatbush. So the first question we have is about setbacks. So if you just type in the answer A, B, or C, whatever you prefer. So A is future infill buildings and or additions should be required to align with existing buildings, maintaining that deep front setback. Amy went ahead and showed us some of those images. Or B, future infill buildings and or additions should be permitted to be placed closer to the sidewalk than existing buildings. So there's also a few buildings and commercial buildings that were a little bit closer. So let us know what you prefer. Okay, looks like we're getting a lot of answers for A. And we'll just give everyone some time because it does take a few seconds before your answer comes through. Okay, and it looks like we're about done getting answers. So I'm going to go ahead into the next one. And like Amy said, you don't need to register again. You'll just type in your next answer. Okay, so this is about land uses. So type in either A, B, or C. A mix of neighborhood serving commercial uses in addition to residential should be permitted in existing and potential new structures. Or B, permitted land uses in this area should be primarily residential. Or C, not sure yet. Okay, awesome. Looks like we're still getting a few answers, so I'm going to give it a little bit more time. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and advance to the next one. So Albany Ave south of Flatbush for housing types. So A, do you prefer a mix of missing middle housing types should be permitted along the corridor in new or retrofitted buildings? Or B, permitted housing types should be limited to single family or duplex units? Or C, not sure yet. And some of those missing middle housing types were triplexes, townhomes. Okay, so I'm just going to give it a little bit more time because it looks like we're still getting a few more answers. And this will be our last question. So after this, I'm going to let Amy take over the screen again, and then we'll have some more polling questions later. Okay, Amy, are you ready? Thank you. Amy, we can't hear you yet.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Next, we're moving on to the area north of Flatbush. So again, this is north of Flatbush Avenue is where Albany Avenue, the character starts to change a bit. You can see here in the aerial photograph, there are some buildings that are set back from the street. It really turns more into a commercial area leading towards the boundary with the county. And so here's on the ground what that looks like. There are still some residential forms in the area, but again, much more commercial forms, and buildings in some cases are set back and parking in the front. Here's a view a little further down the corridor, and you can see again kind of that pattern of what is the development existing along the corridor today. So we've been curious, what the future vision for this area should be, and where buildings should be placed. And as Victor mentioned up front, in a form-based code, We can be very specific about where future buildings are placed. And so we picked a site along the corridor. You can see here as a sample study, just so that, not that we were identifying this site specifically, but just so we could do a drawing with real dimensions and test things, and as food for thought to get some feedback from the group we have here tonight. So here is the existing conditions that are, you can see Albany Avenue here in the foreground, and this existing parcel that had, they believe it was a car sales and a parking lot. And so the first scenario is, what if that had some new development on it in the future, and if the rules could be flexible for where the building is placed. So in this case, the building is set back and it has parking in the front, as kind of the existing trend along much of the corridor today that you see. And so that's one potential future scenario. A second potential future scenario here is, what if the buildings were required to come to the front and put the parking behind? So again, it creates a very different urban feeling along the street edge. The buildings could be set back a bit to allow some space for a sidewalk in the front. There's a very narrow existing sidewalk today. So this, the buildings were pulled forward, probably wanting to have a deeper sidewalk, opportunity for landscaping and trees, and then the parking happening to the rear of the lot. So again, this creates a very different feeling for walking along the street, and potentially, as Victor showed in that image from the Form-Based Code Institute at the top, that that could precede some additional changes, potentially street design changes. I'll go back and forth on that for a minute. Here you can see the existing conditions. The street has 4 lanes, 2 in each direction. So we just drew a hypothetical here. What if that 4 lanes changed to 3? So you could do 1 lane in each direction with turn lanes in either direction happening along the corridor. And so that would give you some additional space for sidewalks, or we're showing here an opportunity for a multi-use trail. So again, so, the ideas here are, thinking about what the vision is for the future of this corridor as we write the rules. Do we want to be specific about where buildings are placed, or do we want the rules to kind of reflect the continuing that existing trend? So we asked a question similar to this in the survey that is online right now. And again, here's some of what we're hearing so far. We asked, what you would like to see as characteristics of future development. And so a lot of support for having convenient neighborhood serving retail and services in this area. A lot of support for having parking located to the side or the rear of buildings, emphasizing that pedestrian realm along the street edge. And then also a lot of support for parks, plazas, and community spaces. So we're thinking about how can those things be incentivized in the future. So also, we asked some questions in the survey about incentives. And so thinking about how, what sorts of things we might want to write incentives for into the code, and then how those could be achieved. And so here's, some initial responses that we've been getting. And we had asked about affordable housing or public open space or public parking. There's also an option for other, where you can tell us, if you have ideas for other things that there should be incentives written into the code. And then the question that's paired with that is, for those incentives, what sorts of things there would be in the code to incentivize that? So for example, you might allow an extra story or 2 in exchange for affordable housing, or lowering the minimum parking requirements, or streamlining the approvals process. So again, here's these just some of the initial results we've been getting. And so the poll is still up on the website. And then finally, asking about a few additional questions about the character along the corridor. Do you want it to be more walkable or bikeable in the future? Is that something that's important to you? And then about the height of buildings. Should buildings match the existing buildings that are nearby? should they be allowed to be taller than that, or should they maybe taller if, kind of paired with that question before, if there's something in exchange for that height, such as affordable housing or open space. So that's, again, just a preview of some of what we've been hearing. And we've done this before, so I'll go through it quickly. But again, if you can text your answers to us, and you'll get this confirmation when you're in. And Elise, if you want to bring up the next couple of questions.
Okay. So now these questions are going to be regarding north of Flatbush, so the area that Amy pointed out, and this is about walkable and bikeable. So is improving safety for walking and biking in the area is a top priority, or improving safety for walking and biking in this area is not a priority? And you'll just go ahead and type in either A or B. So it looks like we're getting a few more answers. So I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds. Awesome. So we're going to go over to the next question. Okay, so about urban form. So A, new buildings should be required to be placed close to the sidewalk with parking to the rear to encourage walkability. B, new buildings should be permitted to be set back from the street with parking in the front. C, not sure yet. So you'll just type in A, B, or C. Okay, I'm just going to give it a little bit more time. Okay, and the next question that we have is actually a short answer. So are there any elements of your vision for Albany Ave that have not been discussed yet? Any ideas, any things that you think we need to be thinking about when zoning for Albany Ave? So you can just type in a short answer and it'll populate on the screen.
Great, these are really interesting. It's very interesting to see as people are thinking and seeing some of the answers, what other things come up. So I see things about transit, sidewalks, trees. Let's see. You don't change the behavior of drivers. I don't know, Victor, if you want to talk about that at all, what things influence the behavior of drivers.
Sure. One of the things that happens is that we tended in the middle of the last century to add lanes and widen roads, thinking that would help address congestion. What it tended to do is just loosen up the system to encourage more and more driving and longer trips, more driving for everything. But then outside rush hour, there's all that extra asphalt, and those extra wide lanes and more lanes tend to be an invitation to higher speed driving, which is the most dangerous thing. It's the thing that makes it a lot more likely for someone to end up a fatality statistic if they are a pedestrian and are collided with by a motorist. So actually, extra asphalt, it doesn't really help with safety. It makes it worse. It doesn't always even help with relieving congestion because more asphalt, more lanes draw more cars and more car dependence. that what you were getting at, Amy?
Yeah, no, that's
Your
great.
problem.
And I think
These are
the
very
numbers are starting to slow down. You know, we will, all of these will get recorded and sent to us. I wanted to mention also with the survey that is online, there's a similarly open-ended question at the end that you can, kind of send us your thoughts. And so if there's, things that don't fit into any of the questions that we're asking, but that you're thinking about, about Albany Avenue that you want to see reflected in the zoning or have us be thinking about as we're thinking about the zoning, please continue to send those along. So Lisa, I'm going to switch over and we're going to talk about Hurley Avenue next. So again, Hurley Avenue was another area that we really felt we could use some additional feedback on. Here on the screen, you see the area that we're focused on, really starting around Washington Avenue and moving all the way, going all the way to the city, across the thruway and to the border with the county, and so or with Ulster. And so we're going to first go and take a virtual tour down the street, what it's like to walk along the corridor. And so this is near Washington Avenue, and in this area of the corridor, there's a lot of, you can see kind of a mix of residential and commercial forms on the south side of the street. On the north side, you're really primarily commercial, and a lot of parking entrances to parking lots are along the street edge here. Continuing along near East Corey Street, kind of a continuation of that trend, it becomes more, of a residential housing forms on the south side, and you can see the commercial form on the north side. Continuing progressing towards the west near Snyder Avenue, there's really the character of the street here really feels a little more residential, but there are some commercial businesses either in the housing or kind of tucked into a second layer back behind the buildings that are along the corridor. And then as you get west of the thruway, the character is really quite different. This is, kind of getting towards the edges of town. And so the buildings are much less formal and set back from the street and don't really have that formal building to street relationship that we had on the other end of the corridor. So looking at the existing zoning map first, a lot of this corridor is zoned as limited office. So that's what is allowed today. There is a one family residential zoning on the south side. And you can see on the map here along some portions of the corridor. And then as you get towards the east, towards Uptown and Washington Avenue, it is general commercial zoning. And then multifamily residential on the other side of the thruway. So we're going to zoom in now on the area near Washington Avenue first. And so as urban planners, we like to study the form of the existing buildings, and then we're thinking about what the rules should be for any future development in this area. So one thing that stands out to us in this area of the corridor, well, first of all, there's a lot of similarities here between this area and the area of Albany Avenue that we were just looking at in terms of, it's kind of a mixture of some parking lots along the street, as well as, some buildings that come up to the edge of the sidewalk. So it's really, diverse, but we also, kind of are looking at the parking areas that are here, and thinking about the rules for parking and what those should be. And we touched on this a little bit during the charrette, but it is something that we want to revisit with y'all tonight, and that is thinking about minimum parking requirements, and should there continue to be minimum requirements for new development along this corridor. And so this is something that if you do a Google search, you'll find a lot of news. This story actually was just published yesterday, and so we thought it was interesting in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where we've been lucky to do some work. And 6 years ago, they did away with their minimum parking requirements, and so now they're looking back at what that has resulted in, and really they're finding that pretty positive results, where it has encouraged some infill and reuse of buildings, where parking had limited the potential, creating new opportunities for entrepreneurs and for housing. And so it's something that we're thinking about. Why do we do this? Why would we think about removing the minimums? And I just want to say up front too, we're not saying that there won't be parking, but what we're proposing or thinking about is that there won't be a minimum number of spaces required by the code. So developers and property owners would get to decide how much parking they need to support their businesses on their lots. And so why is that potentially a good thing? It saves land. You know, there's not an arbitrary requirement that requires you to set aside a certain part of your site for parking. If that's not needed, you can use it for other things. It helps affordability. There's a chance to, you know, really, you know, like I said, use more of the lot. You can have, you know, additional units and additional affordable units included. If you're, you know, doing a housing development, you don't lose as much of your site to a parking lot if you don't think that much parking is needed. Now, I mentioned it encourages new investment, and this is really, you know, specifically on sites that are smaller, or, you know, obviously in the historic areas where there wasn't parking when the buildings were originally built. You know, this, you know, just opens it up for entrepreneurs or small businesses to be able to inhabit space and not be, you know, removes the barriers of having to ask for special permission to not have those 5 parking spaces on their site. And then it promotes walking and biking. So, you know, more ways for people to get, you know, if there's not as many parking spaces and you live within walking or biking distance, you might choose to do that more often. So again, I mentioned there's lots of resources for this. The reinventingparking.org is another site you could check out. Some of these, the information on the bottom of the slide here talks about you know, what they have found, where minimum parking requirements have been removed to be the results. Another resource to look at, strongtowns.org, and they have this interesting map that you like to look at, and they're tracking progress on places across the country that have been removing minimums. So, you know, 6 years ago when Fayetteville did it, this was a kind of a brand new idea. They weren't sure how it was going to turn out, but you know, now there's more and more places across the country that are doing this, and you know, you know, there's results that you can look at and see how that has turned out for them. So it's something that we're thinking a lot about as we're writing the code, and we're going to ask your thoughts again. We're curious if this corridor is one of the places that we would want to think about removing the parking minimums as a way, you know, for, you know, kind of getting some of those positive benefits moving forward. Looking here, we're zoomed in on the west side of the corridor and the area near the thruway, and you know, we're looking at the patterns of the lots here. And you know, on the south side of the street, you can see a lot of you know, the kind of standard lot depths, but on the north side, really very deep parcels that run from Hurley Avenue, and this is true all along the corridor. You know, the parcels are pretty deep, running all the way along the avenue, and really to the area where there is planned to be the rail trail. Now, there's a couple of different options for where that alignment might be. We're looking at the plans on the Ulster County website of, you know, what that potential improvement of that multi-use trail in this area could be. And so, you know, knowing this is something that's envisioned and coming in the future, here's on the left side of the screen here, you see the plan map. And so we're here on Hurley Avenue and thinking about that, the rail trail that's coming, potentially coming through here in planning. And on the right here, you know, some examples of what we call trail-oriented development. So, you know, there's an opportunity in this area that new development could actually front out on the trail or have uses that are, you know, supportive of the trail, and really, you know, kind of take advantage of, you know, it's not there today, but it's coming. So should the zoning code be anticipating this, and how should we be writing the rules for these deep parcels that are near the rail trail? What should we be allowing in that back half is something that we're really thinking about. Now, here's another way to look at these deep lot conditions. And here in this picture, Hurley Avenue is in the foreground, and you can see, you know, stretching back, you know, those deep lots. And there's existing today, there's, you know, we see these conditions where up along the street frontage, you see, you know, what seems as you're driving along the street, you know, the kind of the residential form, you know, there could be commercial businesses, but they look like a building typology, a housing type. But then back beyond, you know, there's, you know, examples of, you know, other things happening back there. So, again, just as a result of these parcels being so deep, we're thinking about what should be the rules for, what happens back beyond there. And we're looking at precedents. So here's one example in Bluffton, South Carolina, that came to mind of, what can be done with these very deep parcels. In this case, you can see that the main street here, Calhoun Street, where the buildings are, there's some Main Street buildings that front out onto that, but they have this really unique, set of buildings, a compound in the back that, kind of orient around this great public space. So there's really a way of, kind of creating these really unique, public spaces back beyond. And so we're starting to think about, this area could really be a kind of unique opportunity to do more of this if some of these parcels were to, make some additional changes in the future. So here's some of the results we've been hearing so far. Again, been asking about what people would like to see as characteristics of future development. Again, seeing support for, kind of similar themes we're starting to see across the corridors of neighborhood serving retail and services, and emphasizing the pedestrian realm and preservation and reuse of any historic buildings in the area. So again, we're curious to hear your thoughts. I'm going to ask Elise to bring back up the polling questions one last time. How to answer. Sending a text to 22333, sending the message to Overcool 516, and that will get you in. And Elise, if you want to bring up the next set.
Okay. So like Amy said, these are going to be about Hurley Avenue, and about urban form is the first question. So you just type in either A, B, or C. New buildings should be required to be placed close to the sidewalk with parking to the rear to encourage walkability. B, new buildings should be permitted to be set back from the street with parking in the front. Or C, not sure yet. Okay, great. Looks like we have a lot of strong feelings for this one, so that's always a good thing. And I'll give it a little bit more time since it looks like we're still getting some answers. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. So this one just says, I think the planning team should explore the idea of reduced or eliminated parking ratios in this corridor. So A is agree, B is disagree, or C is not sure yet. Awesome, so I'm going to give it a little bit more time, just make sure everyone has time to answer. Great, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. So this one is about trail-oriented development, and it states, I think the planning team should explore the idea of encouraging trail-oriented development on the north side of Hurley Avenue. A is agree, B disagree, C not sure yet. And this is the rail trail that is on the north side of Hurley Avenue. Okay, and it looks like everyone about got their answers in. So we're going to go to another question, and this one is going to be a short answer question. So just like the Albany Ave one, you can go ahead and type in, are there any elements of your vision for Hurley Avenue that have not been discussed yet? So any ideas, things we should look into for the avenue?
At least this is so suspenseful.
I know, just waiting.
Waiting for the system. Everybody's typing long answers. There we go.
Mhm.
There's a yin and yang responses. More drivability, more sidewalks. Now the answers are coming in.
Okay.
Great, and we'll give it just a few more minutes in case anyone's typing. They need a minute to hit enter. So, and again, just a reminder that there is also the survey at engagekingston.com that also has an open-ended question. So again, if any of the questions that we're asking don't cover, things that you want to let us know about, you can please go there and let us know your thoughts.
Amy, while people are typing in answers to this big question, this is a good opportunity to repeat for those who might have joined us after we got started, that this coming Saturday's walking tours, which were previously advertised, have been postponed. Those will be rescheduled because of the coming snowstorm. It's not going to be a great day to do the walking tour given the coming weather. So stay tuned. If we get to find a new spot on the calendar for those walking tours, we'll let everybody know. Bartek, is there anything you want to add to that?
Just to add that they definitely will be rescheduled
Okay.
when the weather's better. So
Great. And then for folks who might have joined us late, also, we're about halfway through a calendar of events that lead first to crystallizing what the vision for this new code is, what the important priorities are, then getting into details as we're doing here, and drafting a first draft, which we hope to have by mid-April. And then that draft we reviewed and revised, and there will be all the official processes, the environmental impact statement, the public hearings, which is another opportunity for people to weigh in on what we got right and what needs tweaks before in the end your common council takes action on the adoption of the new zoning code later in the late summer, early fall. Amy, any detail you want to add to that?
No, actually, I've got a couple of final slides that we're going to cover just that point.
Okay.
So when we, I'll go ahead and bring those up. Just again, wanted to encourage everyone to please go to engagekingston.com/Kingston forward. So that's where you'll find all the information about this project, the charrette summary report that Victor mentioned earlier, and for those who weren't able to be with us in November to get up to speed. There's also videos of the meetings there, and some additional background on the project. So please check that out if you haven't already. engagekingston.com/Kingston forward, and that's where you'll find the surveys that I previewed a few of the answers for. We're going to be leaving those up for another couple of weeks, so please go there and let us know your thoughts. Also, we have another meeting just like this one tomorrow night. So we'll be focused on the waterfront area. So very similar to tonight, we'll start out with some background information, probably a shorter version if we see we have a lot of the same folks with us, and then some specific questions and ideas about the waterfront that we want to get your input on. So if you can be with us tomorrow night, 6:30 on Zoom, you can get the link again on the website. And we'll also have the video posted after the meeting at engagekingston.com. And as Victor mentioned, unfortunately the walking tours won't be this weekend, but we will find another time when the weather is better and warmer that we can get out on the street and kind of observe the sidewalks and the walking conditions, and think about the future form of development with you all in person on the ground very soon. So then, the last thought is just on the next steps. And so I mentioned up front the DGEIS is the environmental impact statement. And so that is just getting underway now. So our team is doing what's called the scoping, where they're looking at all the potential environmental impacts, things that could potentially be impacted by zoning, things like environmental, wetlands or historic structures or species, and they're listing out all of these things that could be analyzed. And there'll be some meetings coming up in March to talk about what the scope of that analysis will be. And then as we have a draft of the code, they'll be comparing the code to the existing code and assessing, what potential impacts there are related to the code. So that's what the EIS is all about. And so we'll be doing that in tandem with the form-based code so that when the final code is ready, the EIS will also be complete and can assess any potential impacts from zoning codes.
Amy, can I add a little detail there?
Yeah.
That DG EIS, the environmental impact statement step, is required by New York state law, and it's a really important opportunity for us to make sure that we don't have unintended consequences as a result of changing the rules. But remember also that process has to happen in order to get this ready for the draft code to be adopted. And we might learn something through that process that causes us to come back and tweak it. So be sure you pay attention to what the first draft looks like in April, and then what's different about anything that might get adjusted at the end of the environmental impact statement process. That said, at the beginning tonight, I said everything is connected to everything else, and all the subjects interact. And we actually know the reason to do a zoning code reform is because it affects so many things. So when you read about the scoping or you drill down on the documents, if you see, yes, there is potential for impact. Yes, there is potential for impact on topic after topic. Don't be surprised by that. That's totally normal. And, it's addressed by this official, very careful process with, hundreds of pages of dossier that go into it. That's just your state law looking after this process so that local governments have some rigor to the review before they haul off and change the rules. But we're going to be looking forward to everybody's comments about the draft code while that's taking place. So you won't have to wait until it's all finished to weigh in on potential for revisions to the draft that comes out in April.
Great, thank you. And as we've been mentioning, we are working towards having a first draft by April. So that's our the next big milestone you see here on the timeline. So with that, I just want to thank everyone who came out tonight and shared your thoughts and ideas and input. And Bartek, do you have any final words?
No, thank you everyone for joining, and please join us again tomorrow night, 6:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.